Do you feel it? That your body is saying something about this isn't working, but the world keeps saying more speed, more screens, more fixing yourself. This episode starts with a fork in the road, the pull to merge with machines and escape the body completely, or the pull to come back to our biology, to nature and what's true. Our guest today is Rachelle Seliga, and we don't pretend that we've got it all figured out, but we're willing to sit in the question of what to trust when your mind is loud, when your body is crying out. What do we listen to? A lot of us, definitely me, feel pulled between two worlds right now. One path is more tech, more control, more distraction. The other is coming back to the body, to nature, to what is real. And that choice touches everything: our health, our relationships, our sense of belonging. This isn't some guru episode where we've got it all worked out and we're going to sit on our stage and speak down to you. This is two conscious misfits just like you, trying to tell the truth in real time and uncover that truth for ourselves. My intention here is that you feel less alone when you are navigating your own path. Listen to today's episode to hear why truth can be something you can really feel in the body, even when your mind has 100 arguments otherwise. How self-abandonment can look subtle and what it can cost to stop self-abandoning. What Rachelle means by the fork in the road and why she is choosing the organic path. Why ceremony or transformation without integration can leave your life unchanged even when the experiences are intense and powerful. How loneliness and disconnection might be shaping a kind of forced growing up, and what that has to do with real community. What it can look like when men and women come together with honesty, and why Rachelle believes it matters for the future. And so much more. This is a deeply vulnerable, deeply heart-opening, and I believe important conversation and dialogue between us. Rachelle Seliga, today's guest, is a devoted mother and midwife. Her work is dedicated to midwifing a cultural shift where innate wisdom, personal authority, and the sanctity of life are honored and centered. Her legacy work is Innate Postpartum Care, a certification training that teaches the global tradition of physiologic postpartum care, and she brings so much more to the table, as you will hear in this episode. A quick ask before we jump in. If this podcast has been meaningful for you, please leave a review or a rating, or follow if you don't already. A lot of people who listen aren't yet subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts. This really helps us to become more visible for more other conscious misfits like us to find this podcast. And yeah, just acknowledging again that the name has shifted from We Are Already Free to The Conscious Misfit. I did share about that in the previous episode. But for now, I wish you a blessed time listening to this deep dive with the wonderful, magnificent, and deeply real Rachelle Seliga. You have said something around this split, this crossroads that we're at as humanity, where one path is the technological merging with the tech and uploading to the AI and plugging into the system, and the other is doubling down on our biology and on our connection with nature and our integration with nature. And just as we start, I'm curious to hear what's happening that shows you that this is unfolding.
Well, I mean, if we want to jump right in, it's like, I would say, as the larger container of it, it's humans believing that we can play God. And again, jumping right into it is a human being believing that they can be in a different sexed body than they were born into. Okay. So I'm all in support of humans expressing their true selves on this planet. And sex is indeed binary, right? So in this world, that's always like, abolish the binary. It's like, all you have to do is be at birth, right? To know that sex is binary, except for the 0.02% that are born, as both sexed genital humans, right? And so it doesn't matter how many hormonal alterations we do. It doesn't matter how many body parts we cut off as a human being. I mean, they can look at bones of someone who was alive 5,000 years ago and tell you if that person was male or female, right? So to me, anytime we are believing that we can alter our biology, whether through pharmaceutical medications or through surgery, we've lost the track. And then, of course, then you can get into the creation of artificial wombs, okay, which is what is happening right now, and the ramifications of that. And again, all you have to do is understand birth and understand how pregnancy and birth work to know that that is a huge off course track for who we are as human beings, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about, right? It's like, to me, so much of what it means to be a human being, and let's say the struggle or the work of it, is being in these bodies, right? Being in the bodies that we're born into, whether it's the color of skin that we're born into, or the functioning or the non-functioning of the bodies, whatever genetic material we're having to work through. Like, the way that I've understood bodies and our incarnations is that we heal lineage through our bodies, right? And so for most of us, the work of being in a body comes with work, comes with its complications, comes with its struggle. And we can accept that and do the work of transformation, or, the bifurcation here is, or we can say, well, God, nature, life made a really fucking big mistake, by putting me in this body. And so I'm going to do everything within my control to alter it. And of course, I mean, that to me is kind of the cosmic joke of human free will. Okay. Because we can choose. Okay. And there's the choice, but one is aligning with nature and one is going against it. And there's the choice. And what are the consequences of each? Okay. So I say cosmic joke because there's a choice, but one choice leads towards harmony, and one choice leads to disharmony, and that's what we get to choose, right? So, haha, joke's on us. Which one do we want to choose? Like, that's the free will. And I just want to, personally, my choice is I'm going one way. I'm going with harmony, because I understand the consequences of not choosing that.
Thank you. There's so much gold in here. And I actually wrote a poem some years ago called "Your Body Is Not a Mistake," speaking to some of this, of what you've just been sharing. But in this moment, I actually I've had this similar conversation with many people, on this podcast, off this podcast. And a friend I really respect, who I disagree with, said some years ago, he said, but this is just life experiencing itself. He's like, we are now in a time where we're going to learn how to technologically, change our bodies, and all these crazy things are going to start happening, and the AI and the uploads. And he's like, I'm just interested in seeing what's going to happen. Maybe this is just how life wants to know itself through an evolutionary process. And I found that really interesting and challenging. And I'm also someone who loves sci-fi. So there's a part of me that feels this kind of, like, I love technology, but I want to be, I feel like things get better when I connect to my organic nature. So I'm curious to hear for yourself, what do you think? Is it possible that we're just evolving?
Yeah, I mean, at this moment in my life, because of just my personal recent experiences and, just where I'm at on a personal level, I feel like so many of my beyond belief systems, so much of my like internal structure has been completely annihilated, right? What's that word? It's like amorphous, right? When things are without form. So in one sense, Oh, because I got divorced after a 15-year marriage and an 18-year relationship, and my daughter is a teenager, and that's like a whole crazy experience. And because really every part of my life as it used to be is completely gone. So, people talk about we go through these mini deaths in life, and I'm just coming out of one, right? So like all of the structure that I've kind of held onto doesn't serve me anymore, right? So I feel pretty, like formless, right? And so in that formlessness, when you say something like that, about what this person brought to you, or when I hear things like that, how I feel is maybe, maybe, I don't know, right? And what I can still do within myself is like, I'm not here for that, like maybe that's what's happening. Like I'm surely not God. I surely don't know 99.99% of what the fuck is going on here. Okay. Like that is within the realm of possibility. And what I feel so clearly in my body is I'm not here for that. So even if that's what's going on here, I'm not doing that. Okay. And how do I know? Well, how do you know what truth feels like in your body? For me, that's always been a pretty simple thing to identify, right? So someone could tell me, two different people can tell me pretty far out things, right? And other people might be like, well, what? And I can just feel when something is truth for me and when something's not. And that whole thing of the fusing of the AI and like that, I'm like, maybe, that's what's happening on some realm, but I'm not here for that. And so maybe that's also part of the bifurcation, and I also actually don't feel that the bifurcation is like a new thing on this planet, right? When they talk about, the Spaniards colonizing Central America, for example, and there's always kind of this story of like, and the Mayan people just disappeared, right? Well, on so many levels, clearly the Mayan people didn't disappear because the Mayan people are still in those territories. But then on some other level, like a very large population of Mayan people, in quotations, disappeared. And everyone's like, well, we don't know what happened. And I'm like, they probably just went into a different realm. To me, it's like a bifurcation. I believe that we're actually at a very low point of human evolution. People want to talk about this time as some like really elevated time in human consciousness. And my cosmovision is that we are at one of the lowest times of consciousness and capacities as human beings. Like we're in full degeneration right now, right? Mm-hmm. If our respective ancestors could build pyramids, okay, and now we use kind of what feels like disposable furniture, right? So ridiculously made. We are just going to be evolving in consciousness from this point forward, right? So when people talk about, well, where did this massive population of Mayan people go? I'm like, maybe they had the capacity to go into a different realm that the lower densities couldn't access, right? So to me, in terms of what's within the realm of possibility in this current bifurcation is maybe part of the population is going to align with AI, and that's a certain track. And then there's another track of humans who are like, we're not here for that. And it's not that we're not here for that because of a thought, but of an embodied feeling, and a lot of people can listen to this and think that this sounds really fucking far out, but this is literally my orientation to life, Dude. What is within the realms of possibility here? I feel like we don't even know right now.
I am so excited that this is the direction this took right at the get-go. Like that, it's just so good because these are things that I'm kind of skirting myself and feeling quite uncomfortable about because of some of my own experiences where I've had, in my case, especially around working with plant medicines, where there's been moments where I get these messages of like, all you have to do is just die to who you are and you can become anything you want, literally. And I'm just like, what? I'm not ready to let go of that like that's, I'm quite attached to this this little body of mine that I have all these stories about. So when I hear you speaking, that's actually what comes up for me. It's like that willingness to die, to make a choice that is outside of the paradigm that is what I know, and be willing to die to everything I've ever known, to be reborn into something completely mysterious and new. And in a way, that's actually, I've heard, which is kind of, as I'm saying it, I'm kind of chuckling to myself, but I've heard Zach Bush and what's his name now? The Charles Eisenstein and Aubrey Marcus have a conversation about this some years ago during the lockdowns. But they used an analogy that the reason I'm chuckling is they talked about birth. And it was just kind of funny to hear these three dudes. I don't know if any of them are dads, but anyway, they were talking about birth. And they were saying how in the womb is this time of total bliss. Like everything's taken care of. You just float, like I am completely cared for. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on all of these stages after this. But then there comes a point where there's a need for change, where something goes, this isn't working anymore and we need to shift. And then that's the beginning of the birth process. But that process is actually where it gets hardest, is in the birth canal, is the tightest, most intense, most kind of challenging moment of like, am I going to make it through this? And then after that most intense moment is a transformation, is a birth into something that is so far outside of anything that you could ever have imagined that there was no way to have context for it at all. And they're like, that's kind of where we are as a society right now. We're in the birth canal. So I'm curious to hear what that brings up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly have sat with all of those concepts, but what it brings up for me, because you know, when we talk about these concepts, right, I feel like it becomes kind of like, let me feel what the word is. I'm going to use the word romanticized, right? It kind of gets a little romanticized, like, and then, you know, and then we're going to be born into this new way. And I'm talking about this from my current lived experience, right? And I keep talking about this in my work because I'm really in process right now. But when we talk about, you know, consciousness shifting or the collective being reborn, I think a lot of times we can take those concepts as something that's happening out there. Okay. But this happens through our bodies and through our lives. And it's actually really, the process of creation is really destructive, is where I'm at right now. Okay. So using myself as an example. So like, without going into like mega details, what I realized in terms of the ending of my marriage, and I'm using this as an example because it's like, I'm an individual, but I know that this is a collective conundrum right now. Okay. Because I'm in connection with hundreds and thousands of women because of my work. Okay. So I realized that I had a pretty deeply entrenched pattern of self-abandonment, okay, which comes from my own childhood, and it comes from like all of our, you know, kind of safety wiring of how do we survive within our family system, and then how does that get transferred out to our relationships. And I'm not even talking about just in my marriage, I'm talking about like relationally, right? And so as I have started to take a stand in for my own needs, as I have started to stop self-abandoning. Okay. And people could listen to this and be like, Rachelle, what? You're not self-abandoning, but this is all subtle layers, right? Surely in certain ways I'm not. Okay. I mean, in many ways, but then you have the deep kind of, you know, more private, coveted ways, right? That I have been like profoundly self-abandoning, right? And so as I brought that pattern into conscious awareness, right? Oh, wow. Like that's what I've been doing, and that's not working for me anymore. And then as I started taking a stand in for my own needs, right? And trusting my own truth, as in, this is now what I need in order for this to work. Literally, I obliterated my entire old life. Okay. Because the relationships that I was in that were unwilling to evolve, I had to choose, am I going to maintain them, not being true to myself, right? or am I going to leave them? Okay. And so I can completely understand why people would choose to stay in all of that, because that's your relationship base. That's your sense of belonging. That's your safety. Okay. But my own evolution was saying, I need this in order for me to evolve. And then I'm asking that within my relationships to meet me there. Where it's unwilling, I chose to leave. Okay. So this personal death portal that I've been in, right? That's like I'm like, where am I? I'm like, I'm being born. I'm definitely not born anew yet. Okay. But that, and that's what I'm saying, like consciousness evolves through us. Okay. So many women self-abandon. So we're going to say, yes, the consciousness of women is awakening right now on the planet, as if it's something out there, but this shit happens through our lives. Right. So I'm naming that because it's not really sexy, the process. It's not really like romantic. It's like having to trust our own self, even when everything is that has been kind of our base in life is giving way, and stepping into that level of unknown of like, there's nothing for sure waiting for me on the other side of this. Right. And I can't even tell you now, like I won't be able to tell someone until I'm an old woman if all of this was worth it. That's where I am right now. Like I can't say, oh yeah, this was the best choice that I've ever made in my life, because then no, I don't know. Right. I'm in that time. I'm like, I don't know, but I just know I can't do that anymore. Okay.
It's the most honest choice.
Yeah, it's the most honest choice, but it doesn't mean that it's like, it feels really good right now. Okay. And so I feel like that's the kind of realm of things that we're being called into. So when we're talking about consciousness shifting and rebirthing, yeah, absolutely. But like it actually takes our work, right? And like the very physical reality of our life to apply that, And so that's what comes up for me when I hear that. And also what comes up for me, when I hear people say things like, when you're in the womb, it's the most incredible experience of your life. It can be. Okay. That's, let's say, the blueprint of it. Okay. Like when a mother who is pregnant feels well and is well nourished. Okay. Absolutely. Like that's the OG design of pregnancy. But I know as a fact now from my work as a midwife and from being involved in the world of pre and perinatal psychology and from having so many colleagues in the world of pre and perinatal psychology, a lot of humans do not experience their time gestating in their mother's wombs in that way. Okay. And there's actually something called the umbilical effect, which is that when there's a baby gestating in a mother's wombs, that is the mother is super overloaded with stress, for example, there's like the diaphragm of the baby will contract to like cut off what the baby's receiving through the umbilical cord because it's too much. Okay. So that is a cutting off with intention of what is meant to be nourishment, because it's toxic in a form. Okay. And how do I know this? Because my colleagues who do this kind of work with adults, you have to kind of work to reopen the diaphragm of a lot of modern humans and reopen the umbilicus area that's meant to be a place of receiving, because as a protective or survival mechanism in the womb, we clamp down to try to block off some of the toxicity from our mothers. Okay. So I had to go through this whole process on my own because I was adopted in my 20s and my adopted dad was an Ojibwe man. He passed in 2012, but I grew up as a young adult in a lot of sweat lodges. And that's kind of the rhetoric, I'm going to say. It's like, come into the womb. It's like remembering what it's like to be in the womb of your mother. Well, my lived experience of what it was like to be in the womb of my mother was not a pleasurable experience. So then I had to be able to tap into, okay, well, is it a pleasurable experience if I can be in the womb of the earth? Yes, I can go there, right? And I can be nourished in that way. But at this time on the planet, in terms of what we're dealing with, in terms of multiple generations of trauma that are unresolved and women being pregnant and uncared for and all of it, I would not say, I cannot make a statement like that of like, oh, the amazingness of gestating in your mother's womb, because that's not true for a lot of modern humans. It's just not. So, you know, my whole, I feel kind of like the dark goddess right now, right? Because I'm like, actually, it's not all love and light like that. But I feel like this kind of material needs to be, it needs to be looked at. It needs to be, you know, we need to look at the underbelly of it all.
I'm so glad that you're bringing that forward. I mean, that to me is one of the great thing that the people listening to this podcast, I've actually just changed the name of this podcast, and I'm not sure how long it'll stick for. I'm in a process of chrysalising again, but I've changed it from "We Are Already Free" to "The Conscious Misfit," and I did that because I felt like "We Are Already Free" is a lovely mantra. It's a lovely prayer. It's a lovely hope and a dream, but for many of us, it's not a reality a lot of the time. And so I wanted to really speak directly to us, to me, and to the Conscious Misfits. And what I see in so many of my clients and in my own life is this knowing that there is a deeper self, a truer self who has been just crushed and shattered under so many layers of all these other stories of everything from the pregnancy to the birth to the childhood to the school to the bullies to the fucking everything, just the food, the dentist, just across the board. And now we're sitting here going, I want to be really myself, but what it requires is what you've just spoken to. And that's where the shit hits the fan, because the real question is, if I say that I really want this, and I love that you use that term a lot. I noticed in your writing and in the way you speak, you often say the thing we say we want. And I think that's such an important distinction, because often we'll say, well, no, I do want that. It's like, well, you're saying you want that. If you do want it, there's a lot of things that have to happen, like in a real time, real life in yourself. Is that what you're speaking to in that moment? And that's why I'm loving that you're bringing this forward, because people listening to this, I'm sure they're going right now, I know I need a change, but I also know that it's going to require me to die to my old self. And that's not a comfortable thing.
Totally. And I mean, my process right now, you know, has made me just develop so much more compassion for why people don't change. I mean, I feel like I've kind of always have had that. But I'm like, oh no, I really get it. You know, I really can touch in with why people choose safety and comfort over evolution. I really completely understand why someone would be an alcoholic or a drug addict. I mean, you know, 100%, right, at this time on the planet, because when you are living your life consciously and committed to feeling your feelings and being real with the full spectrum of what you're experiencing, it's hardcore. It's hardcore.
Yeah, well said. And actually, there's something you speak to around, I think it came up in the workshop you did with Dan, around paraphernalia, like ceremonial work in the paraphernalia. And so I'd love to hear you speak to this, but what I got from it was, and by the way, this is very confronting for me because this is what I'm wrestling with and have been for a long time. And is basically that, so I'm a musician, I'm a wordsmith, a troubadour. My songs are medicine songs and my stories are medicine stories. And when I gather with people and share those, transformation happens. In that moment, there's a sense of release, a sense of joy. I've started calling it songs for joy, because what happens is joy, because I'm not just sharing like, oh, this is all wonderful and yay. A lot of it is like, holy shit, this is when I wanted to die. And this is a song I wrote about that experience and how that. And then in the acknowledgement of that humanness, we return to joy together. And then I feel incongruent in my daily life because I'm not living the ritual of those songs. I'm not living the medicine of those songs in my practices, in the ways that I show up in my life. And again, there's so much like layering and nuance here. Like one of the most common feedbacks I've had from anyone in my life is, damn, dude, you're really hard on yourself, which again comes from my childhood and that whole perfectionism, etc. But saying that as a man, I know that I'm not holding it in a way that feels like king, like leader, like space holder, like container. And so I would just love to hear you speak because there is so much of this happening right now to all of us, where we've turned our ceremonies into paraphernalia, where we just, it's like, yay, I've got my beautiful white robe and I've got my beads on and I'm snorting my hape and I feel fantastic. But then my life is in a shambles. So I would just love to hear you speak to that a little bit around, whatever that brings up.
Yeah. And I mean, just for context for you and the people listening, I wasn't born into ceremony, but again, I was adopted into ceremony when I was 23 years old, 22, 23. And the ceremonies I was adopted into was sweat lodge ceremony and then peyote ceremony, because my adopted dad was a roadman of the Native American church. So I would say my whole young adulthood, I was deep in that world, right? But I was deep in that world also like as part of a family system. And I mean, I received so much from the ceremonies, and I have a deep relationship with peyote. Like I consider peyote to be one of my elders in this lifetime, and again, I don't usually talk about things like this publicly, but today I'm going for it, right now I'm just like, what is it? What does it matter? Not what does it matter in the sense of like, life, but what does it matter? Like, oh, my secrecy. So I'm just like, okay, this is just what is true for me. Right. And still to this day, right, this is how I relate with peyote as one of my greatest teachers. And so I received so much. And at a certain point in time, I just started to track like incongruencies, incoherences, discrepancies, in the ceremonies, which was like, how is this person in ceremonies so much and their life is in shambles? What are we doing in ceremony actually, right? Because I would have these really profound experiences and would witness so many beautiful people having profound experiences, and then their lives were in shambles. And I was like, that doesn't make sense to me, right? And in order to even be able to question this, okay, I had to do so much work, because it's like, who am I to question this, right? Because I was brought into this tradition, and maybe it's not my place to even question, right? Maybe I should just be grateful because I'm in this ceremony in the first place, right? So I had to just like really trust myself in the process to be able to question something that I was graciously brought into in that way, right? But again, that is like when we're aligned with our truth, like our truth is going to have us do things that is, pretty destructive again, right? It's just going to turn things to the underbelly to look to me for the purpose of our own evolution. Then we can say, well, what's the purpose of that? Well, because I believe that our individual evolution is meant to serve collective evolution. Okay. So, it just came through my own examining things and me being younger, right? Me being in my 20s and being like, well, I don't want my life to look like that when I'm in my 50s. And maybe that sounds fucked up, because who am I to judge? But it was like, that's not what I want for myself, And then just really holding that inquiry of like, what is the purpose of ceremony? What are we doing? Right. And then also because I was in so many births, right? Because I'm a midwife, so I'd be in so many births and so many ceremonies. And I was like, wow, if like a fraction of that kind of energy that's at a ceremony was directed to a birth, right, and a family, I think we could actually like avoid all kinds of birth and postpartum complications, and we could really like be doing good things, right? But there's all of this energy in these ceremonies, and then the energy is kind of like, it's so powerful, but it felt to me like it's being cultivated in vain. Okay. Like what are we doing? Okay. And I still don't have like 100% clear answer, but I do have some of an answer that I've received in holding this inquiry for so many years. And to me, and again, I'm not speaking for like all people across time in all cultures and all places. I'm just talking about for me. Okay. What I've come to is like, if I'm going to participate in ceremony at this time on the planet, it's to be able to receive the wisdom, the knowledge, the understanding, the bringing in something new to be able to impact life in a good way. Okay, so to me, that's really powerful. Like I could sit down with a group of people with that intention. Okay, here we are, we have this shared intention of understanding what we need to do at this time between men and women. Okay, and then a group of us can come together and commune around that and see what comes through us as channels. And then we have material to work with to put it into practice. Like that to me makes sense. And I don't mean like make sense in my mind. That makes sense to me like in terms of spiritual focus and spiritual movement, right? So the ceremonies to me, like yes, to ceremonies to me, well, I'll say this, like there's the ceremony and then there's the integration of what we receive in the ceremony to apply it to our actual lives. And if that integration is not happening, then to me, that is, without using so much slander, that is like a disrespect actually to the medicines and to the elements. That's how I feel about it. Okay. If we're not actually taking what we receive and then integrating it and then applying it to life, it feels disrespectful to the cultivation of all of these plants, to the ingestion of all the plants, to the people who have taken care of all these plant medicines in all these ways for so long. It feels disrespectful. So to me, it's been like, how do we respect this transmission, And ceremony for me, like my adopted dad, he was a for real medicine person, not these people who like put on fucking feathers in their hair and, make a poster, come to my weekend healing shamanic thing. He was by birth, by lineage, by the nature of who he was, a for real medicine person. And being with him in ceremony was like being with a martial artist. It was like, I loved watching how he moved and what he said because it was all so intentful. It was so fulfilling for me. Yeah. And he used humor a lot of times to say some pretty hard shit to people,
Wow. Sorry to interrupt for just a moment. Is there an example of that you could give? Because that really tickled me. Like that really gets me.
Yeah. Well, like, one time we were at this really huge ceremony. So, for context, I grew up in California. I was brought into ceremony in Southern California. It's really, I'll just say it like that. Anyways, so it's, peyote communities that are very like Chicano, like Mexican American based. It's really strict. It's like people are on their knees. It's kind of churchy. Okay. Because it's a fusion of the church with the peyote. Anyways, that's like the space that I was brought into. And then, they talk about in the Americas the meeting of the eagle and the condor. So it's the coming together of the people and the medicines of the North and then the people and the medicines of the South. Okay, there's been prophecy about it and like that. So I was in one of these ceremonies that's like, it's the meeting of the eagle and the condor. And, okay, I shouldn't be so sarcastic about it because there is a lot of beauty and depth that comes out of it. But the point is like one night, a bunch of the people had an ayahuasca work. And then one night the people had a huge peyote work. I've never sat with ayahuasca. Okay. But I went to the peyote, ceremony. Okay. And there's like 250 people there, maybe. Huge. Okay. And it's like, it's the meeting of the eagle and the condor. It's like there's a lot of energy behind it, right? And my adopted dad was running that ceremony, right, of 250 people eating medicine together. Okay. It's a lot.
That's
Okay.
an unbelievable amount of people.
Totally. And again, it's like, how do you provide containment in that size of ceremony, right? So he had a certain mastery over that for sure. But at some point in the night, peyote ceremonies are very long. It's like from sundown to sun up. It's really uncomfortable. It's like, it's a whole bunch of things. Okay. And in the middle of the night, I don't remember exactly what was happening. Just like weird shit was happening. Okay. Weird shit can be like, okay, there's a prayer over the water at midnight, right? Then the water is passed around. Everybody has a sip. It's already been prayed over. Okay. You just take a sip and you pass the water. But there was like, women doing all kinds of like things over the water, whatever kind of weird things were happening. And there was just a bunch of other weird things happening. And he stood up and he was like, "Good morning, relatives." Because he's watching all of these antics, right? And he's like, "I just want to let you all know that when we come around these ways and when we sit in these ceremonies," and then he said something that I don't remember that spoke to this, but he said, "I just want to let you know that it makes you part of the God squad." Okay. And so what he was telling people was like, you're not just coming here to party. Okay. You're coming here. And by coming here, you now have an obligation to serve God. Okay. So whatever it is you think you're doing here to fuck around with, that's not actually what we're doing. Okay.
Wow.
So stuff like that, but what he would say also, was that we come into ceremony. So he would hold it like that, like this is a serious thing. But then simultaneous, he would say, we come in here to have a good time. Okay. And it's like kind of crazy, right? In the sense of like peyote ceremonies, again, are super hard. They're long, they're uncomfortable on all these things. And you're like, how am I fucking having a good time in this? Okay. But he would say, he's like, this is easy. Okay. When we go out there, that's not easy. Okay. So the orientation was like, this is a serious work and we're coming in here to have a good time because this is how we're going to get fueled up so that when we go out into the world, we can bring that juice with us. Right. So to me, like, I feel like that about ceremonies. Like I love ceremony, right? It's like, oh, just leave me in that fucking realm and I'll be 100% okay. Like even when it's hard, like I have Sundance before, that's a hard ass ceremony too. Wow. Right? Like you have no food and no water for 4 days and you're dancing all day long and you're in a sweat lodge twice a day. That's a hard ceremony. But I was like, yes, leave me here. Like that's a party for me. Okay. I can do that. This shit coming out into this world, that is a lot of work for me. And I imagine for a lot of people, right? So to me, like ceremony is meant to like fuel us up. Okay. I'm remembering my God self so that I can go back out into this world, like, I don't know how it is for you, but my experience of being on this plane, like I've always been like, what the fuck is going on ever since I was little. People talk about their awakening or whatever. I was like, no, I was born like that. I've always been like, what is this? Okay. This is really challenging to me.
Yeah, it broke me for a long time. So I came in with the awareness, the deep awareness and the sensitivity and the empathy for it and the desire. I remember the clear desire. I was like, I just want to hang out with people. I want to have a good time. I want us to connect. I want to be real. And then I went to school and they fucking just roasted me for it. I have one memory that stands out, which is was when I realized I am somehow missing the point of this society. And it was kind of like But then I actually took it on because I thought there's something wrong with me. But there were some kids at school who were playing with a little ball, and they kicked it and it went up onto the roof. And I was smaller, and I was like, I can climb up. I'm very good at climbing. I could climb the pipe, and get up onto the roof. And I did. I was like, hey, I can do that for you. And I got it, threw it down, and then climbed back down. And as I was climbing down, one of the other boys grabbed me by my pants and wedgied me and carried me around while everybody laughed. And I know in hindsight, it's just kids doing kid things, but it's a representation of a lot of the energy that I experienced coming. And I was like, this isn't it. But what I did then was like, well, I must be wrong. So then I became a player. I became an abuser. I think of it as abuser now, where I used women as a way to stay dominant. Like I used it as a way to stay in control, where anytime I was attracted to a woman, I had to be the one who was controlling the dynamic, because then I could stay safe. And that was my own abandonment with my mom and all the things, which actually brings us to, I would really like to dive into this around men and women, because your work has been so focused, and we could spend, you're a master in the world of this postpartum world and of birthing and of women and supporting the family. And yet you have recently been moving into this direction of how do we come together? How do the men and the women come together? How do we support the men as well as the women? And how do we start to have these open and honest conversations? And this is very interesting to me because I was so irresponsible with my energy in my youth, really very irresponsible. And I still am processing some of the guilt I feel about some of those behaviors. So yeah, that sucked. But I also realized it didn't come from a place, and I don't know if there is anyone in the world who is intentionally, I don't want to say bad or evil, but who's intentionally misaligned, who's like, I know that this is not a good way to like be around people, but I'm going to keep doing it because it feels nice. For me, it wasn't like that. I was doing it because I was like, this is how I stay safe. And I didn't know that was what was happening. But I'm very curious to hear from you in this moment, because what it is to me, there's a connecting piece that I wanted to bring up. That's what was going on is the idea of ceremony and integration. And there's also preparation, which is so important. Preparation, transformation, integration. That's the circle that's needed. I've got a dreaming dog beside me, which we just rescued off the street 2 days ago. So anyway, it's been a wild few days. But when you spoke and you say, so the ceremony is where we reconnect to our God self, and that's like a training ground. It's like real life gym. It's gym for real life. It's not real life. It is the real, the ultra real, the mega connected. We are all oneness. And then it's like, right, now that you've kind of been able to sit in this truth, go out and live that in your separate self out there in the world. And that's where I have fallen apart again and again and again and again. And a part of it is connected to what I have heard you speak to, which is re-villaging. I need more of a village, and I'm building that village now. I'm really prioritizing those connections. But I guess that's the piece where it's coming together for me, is this piece of why do we need to bring men and women together? Why is that so important for someone who's worked for 20 plus years supporting women? And how is it a part of this idea of the ceremony and the living of the ceremony in everyday life as a practice? I hope that all makes sense. Let me know if there was too much there.
Well, yeah, I was trying to like track it all. But the thread that like stands out actually the most for me from like what I was talking about and then what you first started talking about, and then it feels like somehow it bridges into this new piece, is, your experience and then my experience too in our own ways of like being born how we are essentially, right? And then everything that you went through and then, everything I went through as children, and that foundational piece of something's wrong with me, right? And somehow that feels really alive because I feel like that's not talked about a lot. And I feel like that's really important because I'm sure that you have done so much work with that, and I have done so much work with that. And it's so much different for sure than how it was for me when I was younger. And there's still threads of that, right? There's still threads of that. And I would say, like, even when I talk about it, there's so much grief that arises for me in that, just like as I touch into that. Because again, like this world in my experience, right, and it sounds like in your experience, and I feel like in many others, and for sure not everyone, okay, but when you're born, awakened to your true nature, let's say your God self, and then that's juxtaposed with this current external reality that's not mirroring back to you love and care, it's really devastating, right? And again, that's what makes me compassionate for people who are addicts, right? And who aren't choosing to move into truth because there's so much pain involved in touching these threads, right? And again, to me, ceremony feels like it's meant to be this anchor, right, for us, like revealing our true self so that we remember our true self, so that then we can come out into the world feeling more held by, that which is greater than us, to be able to be in our lives, right? And that is the work. I don't feel like that's just you, it's me and everyone else, right? It's like how then we're in our messy human experience, right? Because we are divinity and we are human beings, and we're hella messy as human beings.
Hella
right?
messy.
Yep. We're very, very, very messy. So,
but I think there's just a piece, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to grab this before it wanders off. But because I really resonate with what you're saying. And I think the tenderness that I just felt when I heard you speaking was something I just want to acknowledge, that like for so many of us, and as you said, not necessarily, it doesn't seem like it was for everyone, because for some people they were like, well, it just came in and they told me this is how it is. And I thought that's how it was. And then now I'm starting to awaken. Whereas for some of us, it was like, oh, wow, here I am. And it's beautiful. What a miracle. And then they were like, hell no, whack. And that's just so brutal, because what we did then, or what I did, I speak for myself, I turned it inward. I became my own best punisher. And so just hearing you speak to that feels like, oh, wow, yeah, tenderness for that little Nathan, tenderness for that little one who still is sitting there going like, is it safe enough for me to come out again? And that's what I wanted to reflect, is that's the hardest part for me, is that I go into ceremony, whether that's breath work or whether that's a song circle or it's ayahuasca or mushrooms, these beautiful medicines, whatever that ceremony is, that gathering of souls to remember. And I'm like, oh, I remember. I was right. This is how life is meant to be. And then I fucking come back into this society and it does it again. And there's people standing on the corner who have no food and no money and are begging and trying to feed their kids. And there's a scavenging dog I pick up on the street 2 days ago because its owner is, and like just, it's all still here. The society is still doing it. They're still putting up new traffic lights and new tarred roads and more concrete every fucking day. And here we are. And so it's still happening. And I think that's when I hear you speak, I'm like, it's the same thing I experienced as a kid. So what the fuck do we do now?
Totally. I feel the same way. I mean, for me, clearly we have like the macro things, right? Like the huge things that are going on the planet and the genocides and the destruction. But for me on the micro, it's like, I can barely handle going into like supermarkets with the fucking bright lights, and the people not making eye contact and the coldness and the abrasiveness of it, or how parents parent their teenagers in disconnection, and how I'm like the only mom that kids are telling things to because parents don't have the capacity to be open to hear their teenager. I mean, it's all of it. Okay. And so then, how do we be with that, and there was something that you were saying back in there of, I don't remember, I can't track it now, but yeah, there's tremendous grief, right? There's tremendous grief. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Like for me as a child, right, I did not have a single adult in my environment that embodied what I knew to be true, like in my child body, right? I didn't have a single adult, like accurately, reflect back to me the truth that I knew at all until I was like 20 years old.
Sure.
Okay. So, I mean, and I'm not saying that because I think I'm special. Okay. I'm saying that because I feel like we all have to get real with, sometimes we're like, people are like, well, have you experienced trauma? Or, if you're going to work with someone new, like, have you experienced trauma? And it's like, well, I've not been sexually abused, all these things. But I feel like my whole life, has been like a certain kind of trauma in terms of trying to be here on planet Earth, right? Which cycles us back to the beginning. It would be, let's say, an easy out for me to say I'm in the wrong fucking body, or,
right.
Something's not right. Like this is wrong. I feel so bad that there's something inherently wrong with this, instead of me being like, this is my material to work with. Okay. So this is my material to work with. This is your material to work with. Can I accept that without pathologizing myself? Can I accept that without demonizing myself? Can I accept, this is the nature of like my particular work. Okay. This is the nature of your particular work. And this is the true material of what we're working with, right? It's like, there's so many different ways to say it, but this woman, Kendra Kunov, has this quote, and it says, if we can't acknowledge the ground that we're standing on, like, we can't move forward. Okay. So it's like, if we just get real, to me, with like what we're actually holding and what we're actually dealing with, then it orients us, right? And then we actually have a way to move forward in truth. So, tying that all into like men and women dynamics and the whole conversation around revillaging. I mean, the way that I hold really big issues that are clearly fucked up, okay, that I don't understand, okay, is I'm like, what is it that the collective is learning from this? I'm not saying that as some like spiritual bypassing thing of like, it's okay and it's all in this perfect design. No, I'm not holding it like that. I'm like, this is fucked up and it's what's happening. And so in what way is this informing the collective? Okay. So an example with this is like loneliness. Okay. Like the biggest modern day conundrum is how lonely we all are. Again, not 100% of the population, but the vast majority. Okay. Myself included, right? Especially at this juncture that I'm in life. It's like, I know all these things and it's not like I've cracked the code and like figured it all out. Right. So I'm like, what's the purpose of that? And then you can bring in like the statistics of men, right? And like male suicide and like what is going on? There's so much profound loneliness, right? Clearly that's fucked up. Clearly I don't agree with that. Clearly I believe in community and revillaging and all these things. And it's not what's happening. Okay. Like on a macro level. So then yes, to personal responsibility and us cultivating relationships and doing the work we need to do to create community in our lives. And it's still what's happening. Okay. Yeah. So then I'm like, well, why? Like, what is that? What is the informing that's going on? And the only place that I've gotten to, and I'm not trying to say that I need to like sense make out of everything in reality, because I don't. There's a lot of things I don't understand. But what has come to me is like, I really feel, and I'm not the first one who's talked about this, okay, but I feel like we're in this time of individuation, not individualism, but individuation, where in order for us to actually be able to revillage and like actually be in community, we have to actually know how to be sovereign beings so that we're not coming together in codependence, okay? Because all of the, not all, the vast majority of the structures of community, in the past 100 years, right, in terms of intentional communities and, forged communities like that, there's so many codependent relationships happening. So like, how do we, through all of the traumas that we've all experienced, right, come back together in healthy, righteous interdependence. And to me, it's like, in order for us to be actually interdependent, we have to know also how to be completely sovereign, so that, you know, me and you, for example, could be in a conversation and maybe you don't agree with something I say, but it doesn't mean that like we can't be in relationship because we don't agree, right? But it's like, how do we know ourselves so that we can be together, right? And I feel like that's where we are currently at. If we want to re-village, we have to become sovereign. And again, this is, you know, going back to the beginning, consciousness is evolving, yes, to re-villaging, but how does that process actually happen in real time? It's happening, it's being forged through this loneliness that we're experiencing, to me, so that we can know our darkest parts and so that we can accept them and integrate them, right? To come into more wholeness. It's not, a lot of it's not really like fun, you know, like in my experience. I mean, maybe you have some clues that I don't, or some medicine, you know. I'm like, that's what I'm like, I need this to be more of a pleasurable experience, you know, because I'm down to do the work, like for real. I'm here for it. And I'm like, I would like to find some ways to make it more enjoyable.
Oh, well, I mean, thank you so much, by the way. I just really appreciate your candor and your willingness to just fully be open and be authentic and honest about these aspects, these different parts, because for me, this is when joy returns. And that's it. So I'll give you the example that I may have shared on this podcast before, but I'm wary of oversharing medicine stories because they, you know, it can just become like a fun story to tell. But this is an important story, and I do think it's worth sharing in that. So I've done a fair amount of work with the Hunikuin, the tribe from the Amazon who travel around the world. They travel to South Africa, and I'm actually involved with the team. I've volunteered because I got so much out of it. I was like, I just want to help this to happen more. It just felt so... what's the word, like a relief, because basically one of the things they say, and you may know this already, but listeners may not, but they say só alegria, which is Portuguese means only joy or all is joy. And they say that a lot. And so the first weekend that I sat with them, and I was really like not keen for ayahuasca. I had sat with it many years before in like 2010, and I was kind of like, I'm never doing that again, ever. That was so intense. But and I don't want to put people off at all. I realize that the way I sometimes speak about these medicines, and I've heard them speak about, people go, oh, but I don't want to go and like throw up. But really, if you're purging, if you're throwing up, God, thank God, because whatever's coming out really needs to come out, and it feels like such a relief. But anyway, I was at one point head deep in a bucket in the middle of the night going, fuck this. I don't want to be here. This sucks. I bloody hate this. This is a terrible, all these stories of like, what am I doing here? I'm never doing this again. And I just heard one of the pages, one of the shamans just go, só alegria? Only joy? And I think I even chuckled into my bucket because I suddenly realized that I had a choice. I chose to be here. I am here by choice. This purging, this pain, this discomfort, this fucking thing that I am currently going through is my thing to go through. And I can own that. And in the owning of it, só alegria, only joy. And to me, I get goosebumps when I talk about it. And that's why I've started doing Songs for Joy as a circle where I share my songs and my stories, because I do it in this way. Like sometimes I'll be playing a song and that voice will come up and he'll just go, this sucks. You should never play music again. You're a terrible person. Your life is not as tidy as it should be. What are you even doing here? And I'll finish that song and I'll actually say to everyone, okay, guys, so this is some of what just came up for me. And by doing that, I can feel the energy of us all just drop into like, oh, thank God we're all human together. What a relief. And so when I hear you say that, like to me, that's what helps. It's not necessarily to know what the solution is or how we're going to fix all this or how to re-village, but it's just to find those little moments of shared humanness and to go, oh, thank God.
Totally. Yeah. I'm glad that you shared that story. And yeah. And it's like, I know that too. And it's like, I do know how to touch that. And I think for me, on an individual level, I need to be cultivating more of that right now, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. I hear you. Well, I can't believe how much time has passed already, and there were so many questions I have. I've got like so many notes. And it's hilarious. We've gone on such an alternative route, and I love it. But I really want to give a chance to, because I feel like we've been speaking to this already, this coming together, even out this dialogue, you as a woman, me as a man, having this interplay of our different energies feels like the thing we're talking about. But I'd love to have an opportunity for you to share, you know, what is this work that you're moving into? How can people become a part of it? What is it? Yeah. How is it unfolding for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I was like, and I didn't really answer the last question that you asked me either. Like kind of, I did. So I'll pick up a thread of that and then weave into this. So my work, you know, for the past half my lifetime now, I'm 46. So starting when I was 23 has been midwifery based and birth. And then I'm now going into my 10th year teaching innate postpartum care, which is a certification training for healthcare practitioners, right? To be able to offer what I call physiologic postpartum care to postpartum women and their families. And I love all of that work. And I've worked like almost only with women, right, for 23 years. And this started because I also teach a class called Physiologic Baby Care, which talks about the physiologic design of babies from 0 to 3, right? So it's getting outside of like expert opinions and ideas and whatever about, you know, how to raise our babies. And it's just looking at the physiology of babies and understanding that nature has actually already provided us with, you know, what it is we need to do with our babies and young children. So when I started teaching that a few years back, I started to have men come to class, right? And be like men coming with their women. And I was like, wow, that's so fulfilling for me, you know, just to be, not only like for a personal, you know, reasons, but just to be able to be in conversation with the other half of humanity, you know, and know that it's not just the women who are holding this wisdom and knowledge, but that it's going to the men, and then the men and the women can work together. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then one of the men who took that class, maybe like 4 years ago now, he reached out to me, you know, sometime after, and he said, hey, we're making this documentary about men's work. Can we interview you? And I was like, sure. And I don't know what you want to talk to me about for your documentary in men's work. You know, like I mostly only work with women. But he was so touched by like what came forth for him through taking physiologic baby care, like what was awoken in him by being in a space that, you know, often is only women, and also like kind of the primal parts that were awoken in him as a man by understanding this information, right? And so anyways, him and his friend who he's making this documentary with came to my home, and we did this whole interview. And it was I didn't know what to expect, but it was such a dope experience. It was just being in a conversation, right? Like a 5-hour long conversation and having it recorded, but being able to share on things that like I've really only shared with women, but being able to share that with men and then hear their responses, right? So for sure, like I'm being interviewed, but I received so much from it just by hearing their reflections. And, really what it was for me was so validating. Okay. Like it, you know, is this, you know, my intuition? Is this real? Is this, and then being validated by these men, you know, cause it was a lot had to do with, my perception of men and women and those dynamics. And it was right when my marriage ended. Right. So, anyways, they interviewed one other woman for.
Sorry to interrupt for just a moment. I'm loving the story, and I want to hear the rest. But there's just you said one piece. What was it? What was validating? Even just like a quick like what was being validated? It
it was a reflection of, okay, hold on, let me think. There was one thing in particular. Hold on. Oh yeah. Okay. And we'll see if I can like contain myself in sharing this. I was talking about why I stayed in my marriage for so long, even though I was aware of like the dysfunctional elements, because my marriage was not one of those marriages that's like, oh, we're pregnant and, you know, we're going to stay together. It was like very conscious, you know, it was through ceremony, through community, through, you know, prayer and intention and the clearing of intergenerational trauma, and like very deep. Okay. So then it's like, what the fuck happened? Okay.
Right.
And I have all kinds of ideas at this point of what the fuck happened. And I feel much more settled in that. But at that point in time, I was like, why did I try to do this for so long? Okay. And it was like, and it was like, well, because I believed in our marriage and I believed in him and I believed in the work of ceremony and I believe in the work of prayer and I believe that we're here to evolve, right? And all these things. And then there was a part that felt totally dysfunctional and is dysfunctional, actually, now that I can reflect on this side, right? Which is that we can't, and everybody says this, but again, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to like embody it. It's like, we can't make anyone evolve. It doesn't matter how much you want to, or like how much you, whatever. It's like that spark has to always come first from within a person. Okay. So, you know, I was just in that and I was like really being hard on myself. Like, what the fuck? And I did all this stuff and there's all this distortion and And then my friend Thomas, he reflected back to me. He's like, you did that because you're a woman and you have that much hope and faith in your man. Right. And it was like, fuck, that's also true. You know, like it's so dysfunctional in so many ways. And also like foundationally was because that is it. Right? Because like I really believed that like if I'm really like behind my man and like, you know, infusing him with everything that I've got, that of course he's gonna fucking evolve. Of course he's gonna stand up, you know. But this has been part of my learning process, right? Of like, it doesn't work like that. Okay. Like, yes, to us believing and praying for people 100%. But there's like only a certain part that is within our individual control. And the other part is that person, right? But it was just like having that kind of reflection, you know, and being like, oh yeah, right. So like as I'm like berating myself, you know, and being so hard on myself, it's like being reminded of like the love also that was infused with all of those decisions, you know? Yeah. So it was just like a really beautiful experience. And then one of the things that he told me was the only other woman that they interviewed is this woman, Pat McCabe. And Pat McCabe is a Dene elder from the United States. And like the very short of the long is that Pat told them during the interview that for the Dene, you know, in a lot of different cultures and places, the world has already died and been reborn again, right? It's like, this is the fifth world, or this is the eighth fire, or this is whatever, right?
Okay. Right,
and so, you know, it's like the world has already gone through these cycles, like what we're in now. We're talking about the old world is dying and a new world is being reborn. It's like, it's already happened, right? And again, it's measured in different ways of time, but that exists in a lot of traditional cultures. And she said that for the Dene, the reason that the last world ended was because women and men believed that they didn't need each other. Okay. And she said that the reason that this world that we're in would end is still because women and men believe they don't need each other. And for me, you know, like how I said in the beginning, I can just feel truth. And I'm like, holy fuck. Like, that's it. And that just sent me on one, you know, it was like a homeopathic dose. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God. Right. And so really from that point in time, something happened for me, like internally and then externally, that like everything has been like reconfigured to be like, it's time to get the women and the men together. Right. So Thomas, my friend, he does, you know, only men's work. He does like men's work and I'm doing women's work. And then we're like, we need to do something together, you know? And so from that was born what is called Rites of Reunion. And it's going to be an in-person gathering, and it hasn't happened yet. We've just been like brewing in, you know, the creation of it. And then how it's been fusing together is that it's going to be Dan Doty, who I do work with, and my friend Thomas, and then me and my friend Luca. So 2 women and 2 men. And we're going to facilitate this thing that I don't know exactly what this thing is yet. Okay. But, we're going to pray about it and we're going to do ceremony about it to know what this thing is. But it's the truth that like outside of the work in this world of like sexual polarity, right? There's a lot of people teaching on sexual polarity and you can come together and do these kinds of things. There's not really spaces for men and women to come together to do work, right? Like, how do we relate with each other? You know, and then what happens when we come together as men and women, like not just in our intimate relationships, not within the work of sexual polarity, but how do we come together and be supportive forces for each other and support the needs of one another, you know? And this past summer, Dan and I went to this festival up in Canada and did some work together like that. And it was just so powerful. You know, it was so powerful for like him who only does work with men and then me who only does work with women. Like that was so fulfilling. But then also like what happened in like the groups that we were working with. So again, it's not.
Sorry to interrupt again. I just get these moments of like, I just want to hear this before it moves on. But like in those circles, is there a story or a moment with respect to privacy and everything, but like something you witnessed or experienced that represents that, what that meant, that coming together?
Yeah, you know, for me, so Thomas and I haven't done that yet, and so Dan and I have worked together for the past couple of years online, and then just for the first time together in person. And how it feels for me is like, I feel like I have this male counterpart. And like when we were doing stuff together, like how it felt for me was like, oh, I have like a warrior brother that I can stand alongside and do this with, you know, because I'm holding that charge as a woman. And like when I'm doing my work, the energy that comes forth is warrior like, right? But then to do that alongside of a man who's holding that own charge in his own ways, and just to be like warrior brothers and sisters, that was amazing, you know.
Wow,
and
that's beautiful.
And then in terms of like the people who were there, it was just having the men and women be there together, and then having the women ask questions that they're only going to normally ask in front of women, but like I'm responding to, but in front of everyone, and having the men ask questions that they're only normally going to ask in front of men, but they're asking in front of everyone and they're being responded to. And it's like, whoa, like that needs to happen, but in like facilitated, contained spaces.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That could get out of hand real quick. But that's that sounds amazing. Thank you. Anyway, if you remember where you were in the story, you ran the live event and it was amazing. And then.
So then we're doing Rites of Reunion. So that's why we brought Dan into the fold, you know, and yeah, that's going to be in person next year, 2026.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Okay. I want to bring it to a close, and do you have, and actually was inspired by Amber. We were chatting some years ago about this and she suggested it. And if you have time for a little bonus chat at the end that I can share with my patrons, Is that cool? Yeah, because there's actually some things I want to share with you that I am not yet ready to share. Even though we've been very open and vulnerable here, there are some things that it involves my wife and our child and things that I'd love to check in with you about, just to kind of see what it brings. But what I will say is what you shared about this thing of a woman just loving a man and just like seeing his, like, the potential. You've actually, like an arrow to the heart, you've expressed kind of my greatest fear, which is that my wife, that I will never be able to embody what the potential that I have, and that I see her seeing, and that she's always seen and always held. We've been together 10 years now. And so I feel like you expressing that in this moment has come through to remind me to continue, and that I am continuing, because I am also, you've spoken several times about addicts. I am an addict. I'm addicted to technology, to social media, and it's a real thing. It's something I've only just really, really deeply starting to admit, at the level of like, oh shit, I've tried to stop this so many times, and it eats my life. So yeah, I think in this moment, I just really feel the scene. And I see myself, and fuck, I want to work this one out, because I see it in my lineage. I see how my dad and my mom, like, their real big healing work. From my perspective, I was 10 when they started getting divorced. I was 18. It went on and off for 8 years. So this huge battle for custody and to just, you know, for all that, they were fighting with the projections of themselves on each other, but they really went hard. But I see how that really triggered their deeper journeys of inner work. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to get to that point with my wife. I want to be looking at this in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, going, fuck yeah, we did it. we the work never ends, but like here we are. Here I am in my fullness of my power. Here you are in your fullness of your womanhood, and we have broken that generational curse. We have rewritten the story. We have rewritten the template, and our daughter gets a different experience through us than what I have had. So I think I just want to say thank you, because I really resonate with you, and I see the bigness of what you're navigating. I can't even imagine, and I also see the light. Love and light, man. It's just love and light is what I'm trying to say. Oh, dear. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share? I would love to hear links where people can find you before we go into the private section.
My website is innatetraditions.com. So that's my outer world work, Innate Traditions. So innatetraditions.com. And then on Instagram, it's Innate Traditions. And yeah, next year I teach physiologic baby care. And it's the 10th year that I'm teaching innate postpartum cares training. I feel excited for both those things. And then the in-person gathering of Rights and Reunion will happen likely in September 2026. So
beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Rachelle. It's Rachelle, right? That's how I say it. I don't even know. Yeah, Rachelle. Thank you for your presence. And thank you for the patience in how much time it's taken us to get together on this call. It's been an absolute privilege.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for our conversation.
Mm-hmm. Rachelle, thank you so much for bringing your honesty, your grit, your tenderness, your authenticity into this conversation, into this dialogue. I felt you every step of the way. I am so grateful that we got this together. It took us a number of times to get our timelines aligned. And I know that anyone listening has had a great time as well, I'm sure. So just to kind of recap what we covered, if you're still with us, just because there was a lot in here, we started on that fork in the road, the pull toward playing God, as it were, and the pull back toward biology, to nature, to embodied truth. We spoke to self-abandonment as something that can actually be really subtle, and also something that completely can blow up your life when you stop self-abandoning, and hopefully why it's important to still return to sovereignty anyway, even though it can be so scary and intense. We also went into ceremony and integration and the difference between deep experiences and actually living the medicine in everyday regular life. Everyone wants another transformational journey. No one wants to do the dishes. We explored loneliness, sovereignty, and what it might take to come back into real community without collapsing into codependence. We also touched on and explored this idea of men and women really needing each other and how important this reunion is, more than ever and as important as ever. So to find more about Rachelle, you can go to innatetraditions.com. You can also go to her Instagram, and all of this is in the show notes. And she also has a masterclass that she spoke to, not in this episode, but she told me about it, and I'm putting it in the show notes. It's called Ceremony, Menarche, and Culture Creation, weaving together her experience of midwifery, mothering, ceremony, and culture work. And as with all of Rachelle's offerings, this is going to be super powerful. So do check the show notes for that now. If you want to join this conversation and take it into real interactive experience, please join us on Patreon for the bonus chat. This is by far the longest bonus chat I've ever done. It is super intense and wild, and we go deep and personal. It's even more personal and practical than what we went into in this episode. So we speak about what it takes to bring ceremony into regular life, why being a partner and a parent can be harder than doing more transformational work, and what real support looks like when life is intense. Thank you for being here. As if you're a listener, a long-time listener, you will know that I was considering stopping this podcast at one point. I still don't know how regularly I'll be putting it out. I mean, this episode alone has taken me weeks to get done. I'm a new parent. Our daughter is now 8 months old at the time of recording, and it's amazing and wonderful. And I have been, it's been wrestling with prioritizing the time that it takes. This podcast takes many, many hours for each episode, and I love doing it. So if it has landed for you, please do. Just the simplest thing you can do is to follow the podcast wherever you listen, to give it a rating and or review, or just share it with one person who you think will love this. Just hit the share button, copy the link, put it in WhatsApp, on your Instagram, wherever it needs to go. And if you yourself are in the middle of a hard season, I hope that this episode reminds you that you are certainly not broken and you are not alone. We are all in this together. And as someone reminded me, I said to her some years ago that the only way out is in. Thank you for being here. Your listening, your attentiveness, your care and your presence makes a difference for all of us. It makes a difference to me in my life, and I'm just grateful to be here with you. So thank you again for joining us for the Conscious Misfit. Let's do this thing. I'll see you in the next episode, and thanks again to Rachelle for being here.